Okay, so let's put this aside and let's work on the shocks next, and let's rebuild them. I've done this in a prior video, so this might not be all that new to some of you guys if you've looked at my previous builds. So with these guys, first things first, we'll do one at a time here. Take out this little bottom piece. I'm going to leave the top piece alone because it's probably already sealed, because we're going to need to put silicone sealant around this thing as soon as we take it off and put it back on to keep the shock from leaking. So I'm afraid we're going to have to take this one off too. That oil in there was a mess. Wow, it was caked. So we're going to be cleaning this up a little more than I thought. Yikes. And then we're also going to have to try to get some of the sealant off of here. Okay, so the shocks have a couple of internal pieces. One is this bushing, another is this O-ring. I just want to make sure that the O-ring is still nice and rubbery, which it is. It's been sitting in enough oil that has preserved it pretty nicely. And then we have the cylinder and we have the pin, the shaft. Okay, so those are all our pieces. I should get a Q-tip and do this, but this is not too bad as it is. Okay, let me go grab some more Kleenex and some Q-tips here. I didn't know that these things were going to be that bad, but I should have known better. So let's do that. Okay, some reinforcements here. Some alcohol. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and tear them all apart because I think they're all gonna need the same amount of cleaning. All right, so these are the two small ones, these are the two long ones. So this little line that the cylinders have goes towards the bottom. What's going to happen is, this is a short one, so this shaft is going to go up in here, but facing down you have the bushing and then you have the rubber O-ring. Okay, so that's going to be coming in like that, and then what you're going to have is you're going to put sealant around these bottom pieces here, and they're going to screw in to the bottom all the way. Okay, so I screwed them in first because before putting the sealant on, because it'll push that O-ring and that bushing in. That bushing is kind of hard to push in because it's metal and it's scraping the sides, and there's threads here and it gets caught up in the threads. It's just easier for me to just screw this in first, push them in, and then go back and put the sealant on. So that's what I'm doing now. Okay. Oops. So there you go. All right. That's 1. 3 to go. So same thing. This line is towards the bottom. That's a short one. And you're going to put a metal bushing. You're going to put an O-ring. That's going to slide in like so. And you're going to screw in the cap so it goes in and pushes the O-ring and that bushing in all the way. Okay, and now I'll apply sealant to it. All right, there's the short ones. The long ones, same thing. There's that little line. Do the bushing and the O-ring. Okay, let me show you how to fill these shocks. Let's take this long one. So I'm going to use 20 weight oil. You pull the shaft all the way down so it's hitting the bottom, and you fill it up with oil till the oil is just below the threads. Okay, once the oil is just below the threads, you're going to push the shaft up slowly, letting the oil get absorbed down inside the chamber. When the shaft gets to the point where it's just below the threads, okay, then you put the cap on, okay, and remember to put sealant on it. Okay, so this, you can see it's a bit tight, right? It's not going to go all the way up because the oil's not going to displace enough. So you see, so you'll be able to feel some resistance. All right, and then just do the same for the smaller ones as well. Fill it up with oil just until it reaches the bottom of the threads. Move the shaft up slowly so the oil gets absorbed in the chamber, in the bottom of the cylinder. Just so the flat part of that is underneath the threads, and then go ahead and screw in the top part. And that is all there is to it. And then you basically just reattach this to the shaft on the bottom and tighten the grub screw. And you are all set. Your shocks are done. Okay, there you go. So let me clean up this mess and we'll see what's next. All right, so let's get to sorting the rear end here. We have a roll bar that we need to put back on. So let's go ahead and attack that. There's these little notches on each side here on the front that they will screw onto, and then the back here will need a 10mm screw and washers. So start with the back. And then the sides here. Okay, once we have that on, we need the shocks. The shocks for the rear are the smaller ones, okay? So the rod here goes facing the bottom, this goes at the top. Make sure that you have the little bushing, the little brass bushing in there. When we tighten the bolt on here, it'll push this bushing in a little bit more, so I'm not too worried about it being too tight. Okay, we're gonna these are lock nuts and they're low profile, so they'll screw in here just fine. Okay. Okay. While we're here, might as well, even though we probably won't use this since we'll have a more modern speed controller, I'd like to maintain some kind of vintage look and feel to this, so let's go ahead and screw these things this in here this way. These are longer screws, like 20mm screws. because they got to reach the other side. Should probably put this on before the roll cage, but live and learn. Okay. So now that we got this all put together, let's see about what's next here. See about attaching this. I think that was to 20mm bolt. That was a little too long. I think this needs to be like around 15 or 16mm in length. Yeah, it's better. Yeah, it's still probably just a little bit too long, but I think that'll be fine. All right, so this basically goes like this, and this screws on there. Actually, that's going to work out pretty well. I forgot to take into account the thickness of the chassis. So once we have those in place, we'll need these two here on each side. I'm just going to keep them a little bit loose for now. Okay. There's that rubber one that goes in there, but it was stuck onto the radio box, and I didn't want to crack the radio box trying to take it out, so we just left it in there. Okay. So let's put this aside for now, and we'll work on the front end next. Now the front end, we're going to mount the shocks. We'll need 1, 2, 3, 4 of these. So on these, make sure you have the bushings in place. The shock mounts up at the top here, and then at the bottom here, like so. Okay. Okay. All right. So now let's bring back the chassis here. Okay, and then you have this guy. guy's gonna mount there. For this guy here, let me find the right screw. Yeah. Okay. And then we're going to pop these guys on to their respective knuckles. Okay. These are both kind of thrashed, but let's go with this one. Okay. So now we've got that in place. Okay, so now we put the radio box on. And before we do so, we want to put our receiver box in. Making sure this radio box is aligned. And this little piece is not falling into place inside the radio box there, so the radio box is supposed to be able to pop out of these two plastic holders there, but the one in the front is in so tight that, like I said before, I didn't want to risk cracking the radio box because it's so old and the plastic is probably so brittle at this point. So I'm just not going to take that chance. The screw I used here is too long, so I'll get the smaller one here. better. Okay. Okay, this guy here, put this little plastic piece back in, took it out to clean it. And this, there's our little, there we go. Just tighten this for now. This goes to the servo, and that handles, this goes to the steering servo, and this other side here handles the steering. So as you can see, pulling that in and out keeps the steering in place. And in order to keep it straight, that's where we'll align this guy. All right, so that's good enough for now. And then we have the top here. And the top is held down by 4 cam nuts here, which are these guys. These guys often get lost. You'll find a lot of these used cars are missing these. So they're going like so. There's a spring. Let me show you how this works. These pop in here, and that spring holds it down. When you turn this, that spring will hold it down to the bottom piece. So you can see when it turns, that spring's going to push it down, and then when you turn it here, it's going to hold this snugly down in place. So we want to put all 4 of these guys and then there's a hex on the top. You just push it down and turn it to the right. Each one of them. Just make sure that the little pin goes in. See? Just make sure when you turn it, you'll feel it lock into place. Okay, and there we go. So that's pretty much it for the chassis. Okay. All right, so what have we got left? We're not going to bother with the electronics in here. I might want to put the radio, the receiver back in, though. It was really clean. You know, so that's the only part that I think I might consider putting back. So let's see what's next. Okay, let's talk about wheels and tires. So I have these aluminum wheels and tires. These are the front because they'll take bearings on both sides. These are the rears because they have an adapter on the back. These are the screws and bolts to make the wheels look nice by putting the wheels and bolts are just for looks. They don't really serve any purpose. These are the lock nuts for those. Then we also have original wheels and tires as well. So I think for this one, after getting done painting the body and all the stuff that we did with it, I think we're gonna go with these aluminum ones. We can always keep those vintage ones around for spares, you know, or to bring this back to the way it was when it first got released. So let's go ahead and get these wheels sorted out nicely. Kind of went through this once already with our Super Champ build, getting these little tiny nuts in here. What a pain in the butt that was. And this is no different. Alright, well, got all the screws and the nuts and bolts into the tire, into the wheels, so I guess they're supposed to look the part, but you know, the thing is, they should have gave us Allen head bolts instead of these Phillips. You know, it's kind of just, I don't know. They just don't really do it for me. And there's not enough of a pattern either. There's only 4, you know, bolts sticking through. But anyways, I'm not going to dwell on it. It is what it is. It's just that, you know, they copied the original wheels, which also only have 4 bolts, but you know, they're recessed in and everything, you know, and they kind of look cooler. But it's all right. It is what it is. So let's see about putting these wheels on. For the fronts, there's a bearing that goes in the front and a bearing that goes in the back. So get the front's in there, and then there's a washer that goes in place along with the nut there. So so that's that side. This side next. These are 5x11 bearings, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so that's the front. I got the rears. Now the rears, you just got to turn them so they can kind of slide into the recesses on the hubs. You'll know it'll kind of just about click into place. And you put a washer and a nut just like on the fronts. you'll want to probably just hold the other side so the differential doesn't turn. Okay. So there you go. All right. So that pretty much does it for the chassis. There we go. That doesn't look so bad. All right. Now, after all, this is a truck. So what about the body? Let's do that next. All right, now that we got the chassis done, we're going to tackle the body. So I repainted the body, repainted it with a Tamiya, I think it's TS, I don't know, I forgot which blue it was, but it's the blue that, that goes to this body in particular. And painted the back flat black, and then applied 2 coats of clear coat to it to protect the paint. So now that we've gotten that, let's start with getting the interior. First things first, the rear windshield was already glued on, so I masked that off before I painted. So I'm gonna toss the front windshield on next, like so. And these things just pop into the little things that are sticking up here. There we go. And then they use 2mm screws, smaller screws. So. Okay, so let's do the tailgate next. Painted the tailgate with a white paint pen, and then painted the red and the white tail lights, just like the manual said to do. And we're going to attach the bumper to this, the rear bumper. This side looks better, so we'll put this side up. Okay, now this gets held in place by 4 2mm screws. Okay, so the screws fit from the outside, and then on the inside you have a washer and a nut. Okay. It's hard to see because of the angle that I have this for the camera, so let me turn this around a little bit. Okay. Do the same for the other side. Okay. And then we got to do the top. I always just screw these in first and slide the tailgate in, but it's just just as much of a pain in the ass sliding the tailgate between the washer and the body. So just choose to do it this way. Okay, so there's that side. Tailgate there. And now let's do the front. So the front has two 3mm screws that go right here at the top, and then it has two of the smaller 2mm screws that go on each side. Okay. All right, so that's the front. And I think I also painted the little badges on the side because I thought I'd just get a little fancy with it. And then I'm going to reprint the decals on a dry sub printer in the next few days, but for the time being, we'll leave the cab as is, just like that. So that basically just leaves the driver. The driver goes on like so. All right, so there you have it. Now, this didn't come with the sunroof, but I can 3D print one of those pretty easy. So now, the final. There we go. It's a little high stance for the back, just a tiny bit, but we can adjust that with the front by pushing the front body post up a little bit. So, bottom line though is, I think we can call this guy done. There we go. One more for the shelf, minus the decals, of course. All right, well, hope you enjoyed getting something out of this video, and hope you learned from my mistakes. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment below. I might post a later update once I get the decals printed, and maybe even the sunroof 3D printed. And in the meantime, have fun. Like I say, you only live once, so you got to make the best of it.